And one of the guys here, Spencer Rattler for Oklahoma, is someone that you and I need to improve on trying to analyze here, because it has not been fun. And also, it's not just us; it's been pretty much everybody. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Monkey Knife Fight College Football Show. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me, as always, during our CFB show is John McKechnie of Rotowire.com. John, week 6, when we started this show, we said, before you know it's going to be week 6, and here we are. Season's already almost halfway over. How you doing, man?
The passage of time continues to astound me. And yeah, I'm doing great. We got an awesome week of games coming up. We had an awesome weekend last weekend. I thought, like in addition to the craziness of the 2 top 10 matchups, you had just a wild night in the SEC, Florida losing and then LSU losing at home in Death Valley. That's a game they almost never lose. And to Auburn, no less. They hadn't done that, I think, since like pre-Y2K or something. And Bo Nix never wins on the road. So like that was just insane. It was just a crazy night. And I think we got a season that's if it's not already off the rails, it's kind of on its way there in a lot of respects. And I expect more of the same this weekend.
Absolutely. Another big weekend to look forward to. 4 top 25 matchups, including a top 5 matchup in the Big Ten. We'll get to all of those matchups and some of the contests within them as we go throughout the show here. But first, I want to just take a moment and ask you guys that are watching just a couple quick questions. Do you like famous childhood actors making college football picks? How about segments devoted to mustaches? Well, you get that and more when you subscribe to our YouTube channel at Monkey Knife Fight. It's free. It's easy. It has so much wonderful content. Your head will explode, or maybe you'll even be inspired to grow a mustache like John there. So, John, how do you feel? How do you feel about the Monkey Knife Fight product? How are you doing so far this year?
I've handed out some stinkers, but I've handed out a handful of ones that cash. So, we're always just trying to improve our process and get better. And, I think it's a really fun game over at MKF. I feel like the options are always expanding. I mean, this weekend, I noticed that you could take Tion Evans, the running back of Tennessee, him versus the running back for South Carolina, Kevin Harris if he outrushes Harris by 30 yards, then you get the win there. So like there's just so much stuff. It feels like it being added every single week. So like no matter how crazy you think you are about college football, like Monkey Knife Fight has like an answer for you.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned improvement, because let's go right into our first matchup here this weekend. And one of the guys here, Spencer Rattler for Oklahoma, is someone that you and I need to improve on trying to analyze here, because it has not been fun. And also, it's not just us. It's been pretty much everybody. So let's set this matchup up here. You got number 6 Oklahoma taking on number 21 Texas at noon on ABC. You got the Red River Showdown. Usually it's also called the Red River Shootout, because these teams, they just put up points. Last year, this game went to 4 overtimes, I believe. I think it was like 53-45 or something like that was the final score. And Spencer Rattler was the quarterback for Oklahoma in that game last year. And 4 overtimes, you would think Rattler lit it up, right? I would say not so much. He only finished with 209 passing yards in that matchup last year. This year, his more or less number is set at 265.5, and the guy that everybody thought was going to be the runaway Heisman winner has just struggled here out of the gate. And that's kind of what I would say about Oklahoma too, that they just find a way to get it done, but it's nothing flashy. So how do you feel about Rattler going up against this Texas defense?
Yeah, it's an interesting call here. And we saw Texas, kind of get in a knockdown drag out fight against TCU a week ago. Rattler, like you said, is someone that we haven't really figured out yet. He's been really efficient as far as the accuracy is concerned, but there's been almost no explosiveness. So that kind of is where the conflict lies for this 265 number, because I do expect him to complete north of 70% of his passes. And I think that he will challenge for maybe his season high, because I think Texas will score on Oklahoma and kind of keep the pressure on OU to put the ball in the air. So I think that we could see Rattler push for 40 pass attempts in this one. And if he's completing, 70, 75% of those passes, even if he's not doing it at an explosive clip, I think that, 7+, I don't know if I'm doing my math right. So I'm sure someone in the YouTube comments will just crush me on this one. I can't do the live math. It needs several calculators and fact checkers, but I think that should be enough for Rattler to end up hitting over that 265. I really have been frustrated with how he's played this year, but that's still just a low number. And I still think that, you look at the total in this game for expected points scored on both sides, it's got to get there somehow. And I think it's going to have to be with some Rattler passing yards. So I will begrudgingly take the more.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, at some point we're going to see the Spencer Rattler that's been hyped up, right? At some point we're going to see it. I would think this is going to be the weekend against Texas at the Cotton Bowl. It just has all the makings for everything is there for this to be a Spencer Rattler going over 300 plus in this game, which he's only done once this year. So I think finally we might see Spencer Rattler. Then on the other side, you got Casey Thompson. 205.5 is his more or less number. He's only gone over that once so far this season, but he really hasn't gotten that many attempts or playing time. There was a bit of a quarterback battle. I think he's had some injury problems. And as you mentioned, Texas struggled last week a little bit with TCU, and Casey Thompson only went 12 of 22, 142 yards. Not exactly great stuff there. But the big thing with Texas here is their rushing attack. Last year, that's what they tried to do. They tried to run the ball down Oklahoma's throat. And a big part of that, though, was Sam Ehlinger, who is no longer there. How do you feel about Casey Thompson this week? And also, I got to ask you, is Texas back?
I think we're going to know for sure after this weekend if Joe Tess's immortal question is correct once again, if Texas is back. I do kind of think so, actually, and I think I think I've been so underwhelmed by OU this year, and I know Texas hasn't been awesome, and they kind of got pantsed by Arkansas earlier on in the season, but I think they're starting to click. I'm still kind of enamored with what they did against Texas Tech a couple weeks ago when they hung 70 on them. I don't think that they're going to hang 70 on OU, but I think that their offense is going to look a little bit more like that game than it did on the road against TCU. I think this is like their biggest game of the season. This is their chance to take over power in the Big 12. And 205, it's a low number. I think that, we're going to see Casey Thompson have to drop back more than 25 times in this one, something that he hasn't done yet this season. And I think that he'll be able to be efficient enough to carry that over that 205.5 number. So I would take the more on Thompson as well. I'm just in on this game being kind of your classic Red River game that goes into the 60s, maybe even into the 70s in terms of combined score. So I will take the more with Thompson, and he's got the added benefit. If he just dumps it off to Bijan can kind of just do the rest and get those cheap yardage for you that way. So even if you're not trusting Thompson's downfield ability, having Bijan there as a pass catcher, I think it can kind of help smooth over those concerns.
And you also got you mentioned the dump off passes. I mean, we've seen guys, hit their overs, with quarterbacks hit they're more on their passing total just from like little shovel passes. Graham Mertz a couple weeks ago,
yep, still tilting.
On a one shovel pass, he does entire more. So that could happen also in this game. Definitely a lot of potential for some big plays here in Texas on Saturday. Let's move on to the SEC now, and another game at noon. Number 13 Arkansas, 17 Ole Miss. That game's going to be on ESPN. These are the two teams that were riding high heading into last weekend. Looked like, they may challenge the big boys in the SEC, and then they both kind of fell flat on their faces last weekend. Arkansas getting shut out, which I did not see coming at all. You might have, because you are Mr. Ugga on this show. So, and then Ole Miss falling to Alabama and Tuscaloosa. But let's start off with KJ Jefferson here. 194.5 is his more or less number. Just 65 pass yards last week, and you've seen his attempts after he topped out at 23 attempts a couple weeks ago against Georgia Southern, and then it just came down since they've gone into SEC play. He only attempted 15 passes against A&M, and then just 13 last weekend against Georgia. How do you like KJ Jefferson this weekend? And Sam Pittman also says that he is 100% ready to go too as well.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily think that Jefferson was like the injury necessarily played the big role in last week's offense sputtering. It was just more Georgia's defense being crazy. But when it comes to this weekend, you're going up against an Ole Miss team. Ole Miss got beat up last week because Bama kind of flipped the script on them and went old school bully ball. I don't know if Arkansas has what that takes necessarily to do the same things to expose Ole Miss, but I think regardless, they're not going to ask Jefferson to put the ball in the air a ton. this weekend. I think that they're going to be like that low volume, hoping for high efficiency, kind of like what we were talking about a couple weeks ago. With him against, I guess, A&M, what was the big one that we were talking about a few weeks back. But I just don't think that Jefferson is going to be putting the ball in the air enough for him to hit this number. And I think that Ole Miss they got exposed again because Bama ran the ball a ton. I think Ole Miss is capable of slowing the pass enough to kind of funnel Arkansas's offense a different way. So I look for Arkansas to maybe move the ball on the ground a little bit more in this one. So I will take the less for KJ Jefferson on the road here in Vaught Hemingway Stadium.
So do you feel like this last weekend was just a hiccup for Arkansas, or is this more of a sign of things to come with them?
I think it was mostly a reality check. I think for both of these teams, I think it was a statement that it's kind of Alabama and Georgia and then everybody else. And that's why we have the number 3 and 4 matchup this weekend being Iowa versus Penn State. They wouldn't be classically your 3rd and 4th best teams in the country at this stage of the season, but it's just been really, really wide open. So I think both Ole Miss and Arkansas are awesome this year. This might just be kind of like the battle for being the second best team in the SEC West, if anything else. So a little consolation ladder, if you will.
All right. And then, as you mentioned, on the other side, you got Matt Corral, kind of the same deal here with just a hiccup for him, or can he get back to that guy that was looking like he might be the Heisman winner as we go forward here in the season? Matt Corral's number this weekend, 318.5. He's hit that number in 2 of 4 games, and he's gone way over that number in those 2 games as well. Last weekend, 21 of 29, just finished with 213 yards. And I think you can just chalk that up to just Bama being Bama. But this Arkansas defense is pretty good as well. They got a lot of super seniors and juniors, a lot of upperclassmen on this team. So it's with Matt Corral, Lane Kiffin, can this passing offense get back on track this week against Arkansas?
It's a really interesting matchup because I don't love drawing on like past seasons to inform much about this current climate or anything. But last year, the Arkansas Ole Miss game was kind of like the turning point for Matt Corral because he had his biggest meltdown of his entire college football career. I mean, he threw 6 interceptions against this Arkansas defense a year ago. I do wonder if Arkansas is going to, take some pages out of the book from what they did to confuse him and stifle him a year ago and kind of put that in play this time. I think Matt Corral has obviously made huge improvements since then, but I think that, again, sort of like what happened to Ole Miss's defense, like Arkansas's defense, they play the 3 down linemen and then just kind of drop 8. That stifles the passing game production. It allows you to run all over them like Georgia did, but I think that it does cut down on that passing volume as far as the yardage through the air is concerned. So I think that Corral has a fine day, and I do think that Ole Miss wins this game, but 318.5 against that Arkansas defense that's putting that many defensive backs in coverage, I think that's a lot to ask. So I will take the less.
Is there a number you'd be more comfortable with him if this came down to, say, like 295 by Saturday?
Yeah, I would have to think a lot harder about that. I would probably say, I'm obviously kind of threading a needle at that point because I'm saying less than 318.5. more than 295, but I think that he probably ends the day like just flirting with 300, but not much more.
All right. And I'm glad you brought
less, my bad.
Wonderful. And then I'm glad you brought up last year's matchup too, because Lane Kiffin said earlier this week that after what Arkansas did to the Ole Miss passing attack, they basically took that defense and they're running that now this year. And it's because it works, except for against Alabama, which, I mean, hardly anything works against Alabama. So let's stay in the SEC here. As we're recording this show, the totals are not up yet for the Georgia and Auburn game because, well, we don't know who Georgia's quarterback is going to be. But luckily, we have John here, who is Mr. Georgia, so he can
look at the timing. It literally just popped up.
Oh, look at that! We'll do it live. Let's do it.
All right, we're doing it live.
So JT Daniels, it looks like he's good to go. Jay, what's that number there?
230.5, and Bo Nix is 165.5.
Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about JT Daniels here. Assuming he's healthy, John, how do you feel about him against the Auburn defense?
So Daniels, obviously, you saw the clip of him last week wincing in pain as he was throwing. Apparently, he's been throwing pain-free this week. That's the latest that I've read out of Athens. So if that ends up being the case, I see this being a game where Georgia wants to play control on offense, wants to run the ball a decent amount, just to maybe take some of the pressure off of Daniels and maybe take the crowd out of it as well. So even if Daniels is healthy and good to go, I think he can be efficient, but I don't see Georgia asking him to throw it much more than 25 times in this one. I think that Auburn's defense will be able to, kind of keep the efficiency not terrible, but somewhere within reason. So I think that 230.5 number coming into this, if we were going to have to guess the line, I would have said 215.5 is what my guess was going to be for Daniels. So I'm going to, by virtue of this being 230, I'm going to go with less for Daniels on Saturday.
Yeah, I like the way Georgia runs the ball. I mean, they had 4 guys with over 10 carries last week against Arkansas. I mean, why go away from that formula if it works?
Exactly.
And then their backup, though, Stetson Bennett, he was the quarterback against Auburn last year. He finished with 244 yards in that game and a touchdown. Maybe you can see JT Daniels kind of having somewhat of a similar kind of game manager type performance here this weekend. And then on the other side, you got Bo Nix. So more or less 165.5. And after kind of ragging on this guy last week, he pulled something out of a hat. That one play he made where he escaped 4 different defensive linemen that were about to drag him down and ended up throwing a touchdown pass was wild. For what you mentioned earlier on in the show, was Auburn's first win in Death Valley since before 2000. Bo Nix, I feel like you rag on this guy and then he shows up. We beat him up before the Penn State game and he showed up and he played pretty well against Penn State, even though Auburn failed at the end. But and then last week against LSU, he showed up as well. So big moments for Bo Nix. He does kind of get there somehow, some way. How do you feel about Bo Nix this week against Georgia?
Yeah, and last week was really like the first time that he had been really good outside of Jordan Hare. He had kind of famously struggled on the road previously. This is a really low number, especially with him being at home. It's 165.5. I know Georgia's defense has been really, really good this season. I think, despite my red and black colored glasses, you could argue it's the best in the country.
I agree with you.
I think they're just like, the point spread on this one expects Auburn to be playing from behind. I don't know how much they're going to be running the ball as a result. I think that Nix just is going to throw the ball enough to where that 165 ends up being in play. So I will take the more for Nix at 165. It would have to be closer to like 180, 185 for me to feel better about the less with him. I just think over the course of 60 minutes, it will end up happening for Nix at home.
So last year for Nix against Georgia, he was 21 of 40, 177, no touchdowns and an interception. But as you mentioned, this game is home, right? In Auburn.
Yep,
so yep. I'm going to go with the more as well there. I do like that. All the things you mentioned. So I'll agree with you. And then last up here, we're going to go ahead to the Big Ten, 4:00. You got a monster of a matchup between Penn State and Iowa, number 3 versus number 4. And since this is a Big Ten game with 2 great defenses, that could be the final score in this one as well.
Especially with Iowa in there.
Yeah, especially with Iowa is right. But let's talk about the quarterbacks here. And just set the scene in this one. The Hawkeyes and the Nittany Lions are number 2 and number 3 in scoring defenses. Iowa allowing an average of just 11 points a game and Penn State just 12 points. So the quarterbacks here, Sean Clifford, 243.5. He's played okay, I guess. Gets a little better, and then Indiana
that got bumped up to 255.5 in the last.
It's up to 250.
Wow.
Look at that. All right, up to 255.5. How do you feel about that against that Iowa defense?
I would take the less, and I was inclined to take the less at the previous number as well. Actually, I think that Clifford, he's done well, but Kinnick is just a really tough place to play. If this was Kinnick at night, it'd be even crazier. But this is just a very hostile environment. The Iowa students are like right on top of you at that stadium. You got the famous pink locker room and so on for the visitors. But I think that this is a spot. I know Clifford has done well to this point. He's gone into Madison and he won. He beat Auburn in that whiteout game in Happy Valley a couple of weeks ago. I think this is where it comes off. The bloom comes off a little bit for Clifford. I think that he struggles. I think that Iowa creates some turnovers in this one. And ultimately Clifford goes less than 255.5.
And then you got Iowa on the other side, who dropped 50 points last week. Spencer Petras, what is it now? 202.5 is his number. He had what I would say is, probably his best game of the season last Friday night against Maryland, 21 of 30, 259 yards. And then, so how do you feel about Spencer Petras in this one?
He's tough to figure out because Iowa doesn't really want him to have to throw the ball all that much. And I don't know if they'll like feel relaxed enough like they did a week ago where they kind of had the luxury of doing what they felt like on offense against Maryland. I think this is going to be a little bit more of a ground and pound game. I think that Petras is also going to have low efficiency going up against this Penn State defense. I think that Penn State pass rush is pretty nasty. So with that in mind, I think we're going to see Petras get rid of the ball quickly, all these short passes. And I think that is going to end up adding up to less than 202.5. I think this one is going to live up to its billing of being just kind of a slugfest between two of the current powers in the Big Ten. And I think that it ends up with not a ton of aerial fireworks in this one. So I like less for both of these guys.
Yeah, Petras last year against Penn State, 18 of 28, 186 yards is what he finished with. And coincidentally, Penn State's allowing an average of 202 pass yards a game this year, which is what Petras's number is for this weekend. And like you mentioned, this is the exact opposite of the Oklahoma-Texas game. I think we're going to get a shootout early in the afternoon, and then later on, you're going to get a nice defensive battle between the two Big Ten teams. So moving on, any other, between our slates or just any other head-to-head quarterback matchups you're looking forward to this weekend?
So I found in the Ohio State Maryland game, one of the more or less options for fantasy points, one between the running backs and specifically Trevion Henderson and Tayon Fleet Davis. And I think Trevion Henderson smashes the 20.5. I think that this is a game where Ohio State is going to get up on Maryland, and they're going to just kind of continue to go at them and get a pretty comfortable win on Saturday. And then as a result, Maryland's going to have to basically abandon the run from the get-go. And Tayon Fleet Davis, I think he can catch passes out of the backfield, but I think that Tagovailoa is going to be more inclined throwing it towards, your Rakeem Jarrett's and the tight ends that I know they just lost Dante Demas a week ago, but I think that this ends up being a less than day for Tayon Fleet Davis against that Ohio State defense. I don't think that they're going to get much traction on the ground.
And then I'm glad you brought up this game because I like both quarterbacks in this one too. CJ Stroud, when healthy and when he stays in the game, has just been absolutely dynamic this year. I mean, we've seen him put up nearly 500 yards in a game before already, and that was against Oregon. He finished with close to 300 against Minnesota, 330 against Rutgers with just 17 completions. So Ohio State can hit the big play. The offense is not the problem for the Buckeyes. And then CJ Stroud, I believe his number is 299.5. I'm going more with Stroud on that one. And then Tua's brother, Talia Tagovailoa, I believe is how you pronounce his name. And I'm going 282.5. I'm going more on him as well. Just because Ohio State's defense, I think, is that bad. And we've seen guys just be able to light them up. Minnesota lit them up. So I think Maryland can do that as well. So I like the more on both of the quarterbacks in this one. And then another guy for me, I got my eye on that Louisville, Virginia matchup this weekend. Malik Cunningham is my guy. Every week, it seems like he comes through in these contests, and I'm going to keep riding with him until he doesn't. And then you got Brennan Armstrong on the other side, who's just been slinging the ball all over the place as well.
Yeah, that's a really fun game. That's going to be like the game that I'm devoting the second TV to, just because, first one, you got to have the most important game of the window, but TV2 is for whatever is fun and strange. And Louisville, Virginia is going to bring the fun and the strange.
I like it. Love it. And then another guy also, let's stay in the ACC, Sam Howell against Florida State, 316.5. I like the more for Howell there because I think Florida State's just an absolute train wreck as well.
Boy, yeah, they really are. I know that they like finally got off the schneid last weekend, but that's not going to matter, I think. And I know that UNC don't have quite as much to play for at this stage as we would have thought, but Howell is still performing extremely well. He's thrown over 300 yards. 4 times this season already. Outside of that shaky opener, he's been pretty much everything that you could have asked of him. So that number against Florida State, I think he can definitely do that as well. So I'd take the more as well.
Yeah, Howell is he's trying to play himself into being a top 5 draft pick. So he's got to do it. If he doesn't do it against Florida State, then he's got some problems. This is all I have to say. John, anything else this week before we wrap things up?
That Maryland Ohio State game was the main one that I was focusing on outside of those big matchups. So we'll see how that one plays out. I would have a little bit of curiosity in Peyton Thorne's more than 260 at Michigan State going up against Rutgers. Michigan State has really kind of transformed their offense this year. They're throwing the ball, a lot. They actually have some dynamic, fun receivers for a change. It's been a while since you could say that about them. So them against Rutgers, I can see it. Over more than 260.
I like it. All right, guys, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to follow and get all of our wonderful content that we have here on Monkey Knife Fight. So thanks again. And John, where can they follow you?
You can find me over on Twitter at Johns_tailgate. And you can find my work over at rotowire.com/cfootball.
All right. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Watkins Radio. Thanks once again for the 3rd time, because I just keep saying this for some reason.
Very grateful.
And, have a great weekend.